Welcome to Kubernetes. In this lecture, you will learn about history of Kubernetes, high-level architecture, Kubernetes components from master and worker nodes, Kubectl command line interface. Kubernetes initially developed by Google. They had their internal project called Google Borg to automate their internal application. 2014, it became Kubernetes. 2015, Google donated this software as an open source to Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Then leading players Red Hat and IBM joined with them to continue developing this product. Within a short time frame, Kubernetes has become the de facto standard for cloud native deployments. Look at the diagram at the right side. It's the oldest diagram from Google. It explains the Borg architecture. I often say this analogy. Container is a bullet, Kubernetes is the gun. A bullet can't work independently. It needs a gun. A gun gives bullet the speed, it triggers, it has a lock, it has a chamber. Similarly, Kubernetes does many good things to container to establish your business. I spoke about container orchestration in the previous lecture. It has a detailed diagram with master and worker node concept. When a container provisioned through masters, the masters deploy the containers on multiple worker nodes for the high availability. High-level architecture. Kubernetes has master worker node architecture. Kubectl is a command line interface to operate the cluster. If you look at the diagram, the developer is using Kubectl to operate Kubernetes cluster, and the master node, worker node has their own components to operate. I am going to explain each and every component in the next slides. Kube API server in the master node. It's the gateway to master node. Every communication to the master node goes through API server. etcd is a key value per database that stores the state of Kubernetes cluster. It must be highly scalable in production environment. Kube scheduler, it watches newly created pods. If there is no assigned worker node, it assigns the pod, that is container, to the selected worker node for them to run. Kube controller manager, it's a component that runs system controller processes. Example, node controller, replication controller. It controls those components with its own mechanism. Cloud controller manager, it has cloud specific control logic. It only runs controllers that are specific to a cloud provider. It is not applicable for on-premise Kubernetes. Kubernetes components on worker nodes. Kubelet. It's an agent that runs on each worker node in the cluster. It makes sure that containers are running in a pod. It ensures the runtime of the pod. Kube proxy. It's a network proxy that runs on each worker node in the cluster. It maintains network rules on worker nodes. Container runtime. Kubernetes has a standard runtime called CRI-O. You can also use Docker. It helps you to run OCI containers on Kubernetes. DNS. It's a DNS server. It is sitting on the worker node. This serves DNS records for Kubernetes services you create for your applications. Container resource monitoring. It records generic time series metrics about containers in a central database, and you can also get a UI for browsing the monitoring data. Kubectl. It's a command line interface tool. You can use these commands to operate the complete Kubernetes cluster, managing application, deploying application. You can also build higher level frameworks that can work with Kubernetes. Next, Kubernetes objects.